Good morning. Welcome back to Planet Doug Behind the Scenes for Monday, November 7th. It's about 5:45 in the morning, and I'm back in my behind the scenes chair. This has become my behind the scenes chair here in my room at the Kojoy. I just have everything set up here with my camera. It's very convenient to sit here, and I've got my coffee on the counter to my right and all my tools of my life all laid out over there. Comfortable place to sit. I just had a funny moment with my camera though. I'm doing the autofocus face tracking, and it puts a little white box over your face, and I'm trying to make sure it's turned on and that it's working. But then as soon as I put on glasses of any kind, it can't track me anymore. It loses my face. I just find that quite amusing. I put on glasses and my camera's like, oh, no, where did Doug go? He disappeared. I can't find him anymore. And the camera's looking for me and it can't find me. I take off my glasses, boom, then it focuses on my face. It's like, ah, there you are. It's like, where were you hiding? It's like, oh, Doug disappeared again. As soon as you put on glasses, the Olympus can't track your face anymore, which is pretty funny. So all you people out there that wear glasses normally, as far as cameras are concerned, or at least this is an early version of face tracking autofocus, it hasn't been perfected yet. You get a modern Sony camera, of course, and it's unbelievably accurate in terms of face tracking. You can tell it which eye to track, and it will put a tiny little box right over your eye and follow you everywhere. And then you can tell it to track a mouse eye or a cat or a dog, and it can track different animals and different objects. I mean, cameras are getting very intelligent. But my my friendly little Olympus, it's like, oh, where did Doug go? Ah, there he is. You can hide from the camera just by putting on glasses. Reminds me of Clark Kent in Superman. His secret identity is Clark Kent, and his entire disguise consists of putting on a pair of glasses. And then he's like, oh, where did Superman go? He disappeared. Clark, how did you get here? It's like, ah, there's Superman. That's the Olympus level of face tracking. Yeah, lately I've been listening to music in the morning. I'm a very big podcast guy, as I've mentioned a few times. I'm generally listening to podcasts as I'm making coffee in the morning, showering, walking around, cleaning my room. I'm always listening to podcasts. But lately I've had a lot on my mind, and I find I can't focus on the storyline in podcasts right now. My brain is busy thinking about other things. So I've switched over to music. And I haven't listened to music for a very long time. I actually took my entire library of music I carried around with me on thumb drives, whatever it is, 70 or 80 gigabytes worth of music that I enjoy. And I have it on these thumb drives. And the other day I took the time to copy all of it to my smartphone, which is the phone that I use for podcasts and music and bedside alarm, that sort of thing. It's my home phone, my bedside phone. So I loaded all my music onto that phone, and I've been listening to it lately. I just had a funny moment this morning because, I love a variety of music. I listen to all kinds of music, of course, but I really like female vocalists, singers. Most people wouldn't have heard of these people. You'd have to be from my country, my background to even heard of them. But singers like Beth Orton, Sarah Harmer, I could go on, like sort of female vocalists, or a little bit folk, a little bit pop, somewhere in the middle. And I was listening to Sarah Harmer this morning, and the album happened to get to one song that always had a lot of meaning for me. Loved the song. And then when you listen to the song, it brings up all of these wild and deep emotions. That's what music does to you. And this morning I was thinking about the difference between being young and being older. I don't usually focus on being older, it's not, I find it a bit of a cliche. So if people make a joke about getting older, this, that, I usually tune out. I just live my life and I don't worry about whether, younger, older, whatever. I just ignore all of that. But occasionally, the numbers don't lie when you're getting older. and things do change. And I was thinking about music like that when I was younger, like this type of music, very emotional, that just brings all these emotions out of you. And then when you're younger, you're like overwhelmed with these emotions, and you're inspired to look for the meaning of the universe and the deep meaning of life, and you're inspired to begin living this life of value and significance, and you get so excited, and I don't know, it's just like waves of emotion. And then when you're older, like I am now, I'm listening to the same song, to the same music, and I have the exact same swelling of emotion. It's such amazing music, and it brings all these emotions out of you. But then I'm here in my room at the Kojoy, and instead of going down the route of, I'm going to solve the mysteries of the universe and discover the meaning of life, and I'm going to live this life of deep artistic meaning and creation, I have all these feelings the music is creating in me, and I'm just like, whatever. I can't be bothered. I don't have the energy for it anymore. I have all these feelings coming up, and I'm just like, whatever. Because, you can have all those feelings, you can have all the feelings you want, but at the end of the day, when my day begins, I still have to do all the same things. In the end, you've got to go get breakfast. You've got to get something to eat. You've got to shower. You've got to shave. You've got to clean the bathroom. Generally, you've got to go to work. You've got to make money. You've got all these responsibilities. You've got all these things to do. And that's what your day is going to consist of, whether you like it or not. And you can have all the immense soul-searching emotions you want while you're listening to Sarah Harmer, but at the end of the day, today, I have to go do laundry, and then I have to change money, and I have to do this, and I have to do all these mundane tasks. And that's life. That's going to be your life most of the time. So all these emotions are welling up from the music, and I'm just like, okay, I'll listen to it, but you emotions, you can just go away. I just don't have time for you right now. I have things to do. I have practical things I have to take care of. So, yeah, I thought that was pretty funny. I just don't have the energy to deal with all the emotions of life anymore. I'm done with those. Yeah, I have practical things to think about. And yesterday was all about practical stuff from the point of view of a Sarah Harmer lyric. Very silly stuff, but still, these are things that I'm doing, things I need to take care of. And yesterday was all about taking my bike out for a bike ride and mounting my 360 camera on it. And I sat in this chair yesterday morning and talked for a long time about all the technology involved in doing that. And I was demonstrating, the selfie stick, that you put the 360 camera on the selfie stick, and then you have to mount this on the handlebars of your bicycle. And where I left it was with the discovery that if I use this short extension arm and screw this into this tripod mount on the short extension arm, it's short enough that I can mount it on my handlebars and then have this resting on the handlebar bag. That was where I left things yesterday. Handlebar bag resting on it to support the weight. And that was what I was going to do. But as soon as I got out there, and then as soon as I tried to do it, I discovered that for whatever reason, the ball head will not stay in place on this short extension arm. I don't know. It's exactly the same as the big ones, the medium length and the long one. But for whatever reason, I tighten this up, and it just moves. Even it won't really rest fully on the handlebar bag. The way the angles are lined up, it's really hard to do. And I found every time I went over a bump, beep, it just fell down. It just would not stay, no matter how much I tightened this, no matter what I did. So the short arm was a complete bust. So then I happened to have my medium length extension arm with me, and I switched to that, and I put it in its place, which meant that the handlebar bag technique was not going to work at all, because it's longer and it pushes the base of the selfie stick higher above the handlebar bag. And yet, this one, for whatever reason, will tighten down strong enough. And I wonder, are they different materials? It's basically the same company that makes them. It's the same thing, and yet for some reason it would work on this one, but it wouldn't work on this one. So that's how I did it. I rode up and down the River of Life alongside the Klang River here in Kuala Lumpur with my 360 camera mounted using this. And it worked, but just bothered me the entire time, because even if it's rigid and holding it in place, the entire weight of the camera is being supported by this tiny screw which goes a very short distance into the base of this selfie stick. And I can tell you right now, there's no doubt about this, that if you continue to do this, this is going to snap off. Because, whatever this is made of, there's a little plug here in the bottom that they stuck in there with the threaded screw mount. This isn't a solid piece of steel. This is a hollow thing with a plug stuck in the end, and eventually the plug is just going to tear right out of the bottom. Camera's going to fall smash to the pavement. It's going to be destroyed. So this is not really going to work as the only support, in the long term. So I was thinking about this yesterday. I was trying to come up with all kinds of crazy solutions. The main thing I'm looking for is some kind of a clamp that, instead of sticking something into the bottom, the clamp goes all the way around the base, like your hand, because this is how you normally hold it, the selfie stick, and you hold it with your hand, right? That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a clamp that goes all the way around and grips it like your hand would grip it, and somehow take this clamp and mount it to the bicycle. And I did a ton of research online, but I couldn't find anything designed to do that. For one thing, I would have to jury-rig my own system, and I was trying to figure out some way I could do that. And I was chatting with a friend of mine online about these issues, and he sent me a message. His first message said, "Oh, by the way, is the end of your selfie stick the same diameter as the ball head? Is that the same size as the ball head?" And I wrote back and said, yeah, more or less. That's a 1-inch ball. This is like a 1-inch base. Yeah, they're about the same size when I look at them. And I had no idea what he was talking about. I thought he had some crazy idea that wasn't going to work. And I was like, well, yeah, they're the same size. And then he says, well, why don't you just put the base of this in the extension arm instead of putting the ball head in there? And I thought about that. And the more I thought about it, I thought, that is brilliant. That is a simple, brilliant idea. And I tested it, and it's not perfect, but it just might work. And his idea is that, you've got this opening here. It's a round opening, and normally you take this 1-inch ball, and the ball goes in there, and then it tightens around the ball. That's how the system is designed to work. But maybe I can take the selfie stick, skip the ball completely, take the selfie stick, put it in there, and tighten the clamp down around the selfie stick. Just like that. Right there. See how that works? And the interesting thing is that this clamp is rounded on the edges. It's circular because it goes around a ball. And because the handle is also round, it actually fits right in there. You can see the curve, right? And it gets a really solid grip on it. The only issue is it doesn't go in very far. You can see that very short distance that the base of the stick goes into this clamp. I'd want it to go in like 1.5 inches or something, like all the way down, all the way down to here or something, to get a really solid grip on it. That little bit doesn't seem like enough. But in testing it, assuming you take this lever and you give it a good tightening, it is really in there. It is, I can't pull it out. There's no way. I don't have the arm strength to pull it out of there. It's gripping it so hard. This might be the actual solution. Look at that. It's like incredible. It's such a simple idea, and rarely does a simple idea like that actually work. There's always some kind of a problem. And so far, I don't see a big problem with that. So this is what I'm going to test next. You know, you just mount this on your bike, and then you just put the stick directly into the clamp and just bypass the rest of the system. You don't need it. The one issue, of course, is this grips so tightly. There's like a rubber coating on the base of the stick, and because this grips so tightly, it's going to cut right through the rubber. You know, it's already started. You know, it's cutting right through it. But basically, all you need to do is take some electrical tape, wrap electrical tape or duct tape or something around the base of the stick, and then this will grip onto that tape, and then just hold it. So, yeah, that might work. And the other option I'm thinking about is, I mean, I've been so focused on mounting things on the handlebar. So you basically put a clamp on the handlebar and attach something to that clamp. And that's just what you do with a bicycle. I never thought about doing it a different way. But I found a guy, a moto vlogger, who had a different technique, and he was using the 3-meter stick. This is like the shortest one they make. He was using one that's like 10 feet long. And then what he did was mount a series of mounting points along the side of his motorcycle. So he put mounting points way back on the motorbike, on the body of the motorcycle, and then another one underneath the handlebars. So he essentially took the entire bar, the selfie stick, and stuck it alongside his bicycle, and it was hanging from the handlebar, like underneath the handlebar, and then pointing way to the front. So it was being supported here, and then hanging from the handlebar here. He had all kinds of support points, and then he could stretch it out to 10 feet, and it worked fine. So I was wondering about that. Maybe I can somehow, instead of mounting it right on the handlebar, I can extend it out and then put it alongside the bicycle frame, like coming down below the handlebars, and somehow attaching this to the tubes of the bike frame itself, and put a mounting system down there at the bottom, and then the whole thing would be attached to the bicycle frame and then sticking out the front. So that's something else that I'm going to test. Sarah Harmer and all your emotions, I don't have time for you anymore. I have practical things I need to think about. And I have to clean the bathroom, and I have to do laundry. Despite my troubles with the 360 camera and mounting it and mounting the GoPro, all of that, the bike ride went really well yesterday, though it might not be the typical kind of riverside park ride that you might be imagining if you think about river of life and bike lanes and parkside cycling, things like that, because we are talking about Kuala Lumpur here. So I found that was quite interesting. Before I went to the riverside, I rode my bike up to McDonald's at the Wisma Lim Fu Yung. That's where I met a friend of mine the other day, a subscriber to the Planet Doug channel. Met her there for breakfast, and I really liked the place. I really liked the egg McMuffin. It was so tasty, and yeah, very comfortable place to sit. So I rode my bike up the hill. It's kind of up the hill towards Bukit Bintang, and I went there for breakfast. At that time, I wasn't shooting video with the 360 camera. I just had the GoPro mounted on the front. I was still recording my behind-the-scenes video, in fact. And that continued all the way into McDonald's. I ordered breakfast using the touch screen. I love that. I love that system. So profoundly different from the old days. Yeah, I remember living in Taipei, and I like McDonald's. I like McDonald's food. I like the whole McDonald's concept. But the McDonald's that I knew in Taipei were so busy. You could never find a place to sit. The tables were always full, and there was always this element of stress involved for me, particularly, well, if I go there on my own, because you go in and there's a big lineup at the counter and you're standing in line, and you got all the stress to deal with in terms of a lineup, you know, people there pushing, shoving. the person in front of you having an extremely complex order that, has to takes forever to complete. And then you finally get to the front and you get all the food on your tray, and then you're trying to fight through the crowd, not get jostled, not spill anything. And now you're wandering around McDonald's with this tray, looking for an empty table, and there is no table available. And quite often I just would not go to a McDonald's or go out to eat at all because I just could not handle the hunt for seating. It's the bane of my existence. And of course, when I went to the McDonald's here, it was early in the morning, so obviously the whole place was empty. If they had a normal counter service, I wouldn't have had all this trouble because there was no big lineup and the tables were free, that kind of thing. But even setting all that aside, it's such a profoundly different feeling to walk into a McDonald's and you don't see any people. There's no counter. There's no lineup of 5 clerks standing at cash registers waiting for you. There's no army of people behind them grilling the burgers and frying the French fries. You don't see any of that activity. You basically walk into an empty room that has tables and a screen. Other than that, the place is empty. And you might think that's a bad thing, but as I've noticed, it makes me feel like it is my place. Like if I go into a restaurant that's full of waiters and waitresses and cooks and staff, I feel like I'm in their space and they're in control of my dining experience. They tell me where to sit, when to order, when the food arrives. They're in charge of everything. You kind of sit there like you're going along for the ride. But this new system, like they had at McDonald's, I felt like I was in charge of the entire experience from beginning to end. I was in control. And I go in and I go up to the screen and I just place my order, and I said I'd like table service, and you take your number to put on your table, and then you pay with your phone, eWallet. There's no cash involved, no change, none of that hassle. Then you go sit down and you relax and you put the little number on your table. And then in a few minutes later, a friendly person comes out with a tray of food and brings it to your table. And then they go away and you never see them again. And I don't know, it felt like I was at home, in my own home. And all I needed to do was, place an order for some food, and someone brought the food to my table. It was like, I don't know, it's like I was a billionaire all of a sudden. Yeah, it was a very, very different feeling. I liked it. And when I left from McDonald's, I turned on my GoPro on time-lapse. I wanted to shoot a time-lapse of the entire bike ride, just for fun. I'm going to post that video to this behind-the-scenes channel. Just put some music on it, and you can see the entire bike ride from beginning to end, every stage of that small adventure. It's quite interesting. But there is a problem I figured out, because when I was using the GoPro shooting, they don't call it a time lapse, it's a time warp on a GoPro. It has an automatic setting, which I like to use on the scooter, because with time warp or a time lapse, you have to choose a setting, like how frequently to take a picture to create the video in the end. And if you choose the wrong speed, it just doesn't work. So I just set it to automatic, and the GoPro will actually adjust the speed of the time lapse depending on how fast you are traveling. It can sense the speed that you are traveling and adjust the time lapse accordingly. And it worked really well, I thought, on a scooter. So I did that on the bike yesterday, and I found it didn't work on the bike because you are stopping and starting so often. And you stop at a red light, stop at another red light, stop at an intersection, stop here to adjust the camera. You're just constantly stopping and then moving again. And then the GoPro time warp system would adjust the speed dramatically at those moments. So suddenly the time warp would just be like zooming along, and then it would go back into an appropriate speed. I felt like I'm watching the time lapse and I can see, okay, this is the right speed. This feels right for a bike ride. But then suddenly it would kick into hyperspeed again, and you're moving really, really fast and then slow and then fast and then slow. So I think in the future, to do a time warp, you don't use the automatic setting for a bike ride. You just have to figure out which setting is appropriate for a bike ride. Make a mental note so you remember, and then just use that setting in the future. But yeah, I enjoyed looking at the time lapse afterward. It's pretty crazy. And my real video for Planet Doug, my River of Life video, I didn't start recording that on the 360 camera until I got to the river. I was right at Masjid Jamek, the Masjid Jamek viewpoint. There's a bridge there going across the river, and you can see Masjid Jamek, and that's where I was going to start the official Planet Doug video. And that's when I discovered that my 360 mounting system wasn't going to work. And I stayed there for about, I don't know, half an hour, because I had to switch over to the new system and adjust everything and make sure everything was working. And then as I was cycling along, I found that the selfie stick was like bouncing around too much. And I was a little bit worried about it. It was too flexible. So I stopped again, and I got out a bunch of zip ties. And I used all these zip ties I had in my toolkit, and I used those to sort of try to secure the pole in position and make it a bit more rigid. And that kind of worked out all right. But then you'd have to zip tie the pole, every time you use it. And there were a surprising number of people out there, but it was a Sunday morning, car-free morning, and tons of people were out cycling along the river and walking along the river. People hiking for exercise, families pushing strollers with babies, people zooming by on racing bikes, people on folding bikes, people on mountain bikes. Tons of people out enjoying the River of Life. So from that point of view, a very, very successful project. But if you are looking for a gentle, relaxing ride along a scenic riverside, then the River of Life is not for you. It certainly was not. Yeah, that was not my experience of the River of Life, because again, this is Kuala Lumpur. And then every few feet, you're running into some kind of a barrier, especially if you're cycling. So right at the very beginning, I went up a ramp that I thought was for cyclists to take me over, and the pedestrians would be down here, and this must be the bike ramp. But of course I ran right into a dead end. It's like, oh, there's a huge barrier, there's a big gate there, and the gate wasn't unlocked, so I couldn't get through there. I had to turn around, come all the way back down. And then I'm cycling along the trail, and I come to a set of stairs, and so I had to get off the bike, pick up my bike and carry it down the stairs. And then I ran into a road, very, very busy road with a real complex system of flyovers and access and interchanges and red lights and green lights and pedestrian crossing lights and people everywhere, cars and traffic everywhere. And it was really hard to figure out even where to go. Like, where is the bike lane for the River of Life? It's like, okay, which way do I go? It was not obvious. But then eventually you have to fight your way across this road, and I didn't even wait for any of the pedestrian crosswalk signals, because if you did wait for those, you'd be waiting for the rest of your life. And you start losing confidence that they're even working. The longer you're standing there waiting to get the happy little green man saying, okay, you can walk across now. You're waiting and waiting and waiting, and you found the button, you've pushed the button, you've pushed the button again, you've pushed it a third time, it's not changing, it's not changing. It's like, man, how long has it been? And eventually you think it must be broken. So you just go across, you wait for a break in the traffic, and then you go halfway across and wait on the other side, and then wait for a break on the other side and get the other way across. Because if you wait for those pedestrian crossing lights, you're going to be waiting a very long time. And that would happen over and over again. I would run into a road, and then another road, then another road. And then I followed the riverside until I got to the road that took me over to like kind of the brick fields area. There's a section of the river where the monorail is following the riverside, and things open up a little bit there. But it's still kind of complicated and confusing. At every stage, you sort of have to figure out which way to go. It's like, okay, where do I go? How do I follow the river? Is this the bike path or not? Where do I go exactly? And then so I get along into Brickfields, and I run into a giant construction site. the big building going up with the green construction safety walls all around. And I remember in the past, there used to be an opening through this construction zone. You have like green metal sheets on one side, and then on the other side, creating this narrow tunnel. And then I was always walking in those days, and then you walk through the tunnel. This is how I would get to KL Central. I just walk along the river, following, the river of life, and then you cut inwards to KL Central, into Little India, going down this tunnel through the construction zone. But they had walled it off completely. Now it was just like a solid green wall of metal sheets, and you couldn't go forward at all. So I had to turn around and go back, and they put in a bike lane, marked with blue paint to follow, and the bike lane curves away from the river into brick fields and goes around there for a while, and then goes all the way around the construction zone, and then kind of comes back to the river again. So you sort of had to figure that out. Like, you're following the bike lane. You want to follow the river, but now the bike lane is taking you away from the river, and you're thinking, I don't want to go this direction. I'm trying to follow the river, and is it going to get me back to the river? And you ride along, and you have faith that eventually you're going to end up back at the river. And I had some thoughts about bike lanes as I was riding along there, because I don't have a lot of experience with bike lanes. I haven't spent time in cities that have them, and generally speaking, my instinct is to think that they're not very useful, because bikes and cars, they can't coexist. That's just the way it is. If you put bikes and cars on the same road, they're going to conflict with each other. There's nothing you can do about it. A car weighs a ton. It's a heavy piece of steel moving at high speed. You're sitting on a bike, you're completely exposed. The car, if it hits you, will kill you. It's much heavier than you are, much faster than you are, and the cars basically dominate the roads, and that's just the way it is. And you can put in all the bike lanes you want along the side, but no matter how many bike lanes you put in place, there's still a conflict there. That's just the way it is. So I don't have a great deal of good feelings about bike lanes. I just assume that as a cyclist, I'm living in the world of cars, and it's up to me to find my own space on that road and ride defensively and ride carefully and just create my own space in the world of cars. That's just the way it is. You're never going to be able to carve out a section and say, okay, this is for cyclists, and you cars, you stay out of this area because that's for people on bicycles. Because nobody in a car is going to listen to you. So I'm following this bike lane, and everybody in Kuala Lumpur double parks. So what you've got is a street, row of cars, like parking spaces, beside the curb, beside the edge of the road is a row of parked cars. Then there's the bike lane, which, by the way, the bike lane funnels you right into the car doors. Like if someone is in the car and they fling open their door, you as a cyclist, you get doored. You run right into that. And the bike lane basically runs right beside the parked cars, which is the most dangerous place for a cyclist to be, because you're right beside the cars, and if anyone suddenly opens the door, you run right into the door. So the bike lane from that point of view is like the most dangerous place you can ride your bike, which is kind of illogical. So all these cars are parked along the side of the road, and all the parking spots are taken. They're all full, and then other people in cars come along. They want to park their cars, and there's no space for them, so they double park, and they park beside the parked cars, and they're basically parked right in the bike lane. So basically the bike lane has become a second level of car parking. And that's inevitable. That is just what is going to happen. And you can see cities all around the world, they try to put in bike lanes, and then people who park their cars in the bike lane, they get ticketed, police come along, tell them to move, but there's nothing you can do. Cars will park in the bike lanes. And it's understandable too, because how often does a bike come along? There you've got a dedicated bike lane, and the car driver's thinking, well, there's all that space I can use, and I haven't seen a person on a bike for 2 hours, so what harm can it be to park my car there? So they all do. So I'm riding my bike through this, on this bike lane, going through brick fields, and it's basically, I'm riding serpentine, because every 30 feet there's a car in the bike lane. So I'm like riding along, and I got to go around the car, back to the bike lane, around the next car, back to the bike lane, around. You know, you're basically riding like this, snaking along, going in and out of the bike lane, and you have to zoom out into traffic to get around all the parked cars. That was pretty funny. And this continued basically in this fashion for the entire bike ride, all the way to the end. It ended at Mid-Valley. I think the River of Life project ended at the Mid-Valley shopping center. And I was just constantly crossing roads, crossing bridges, going up and down stairs, trying to figure out which way to go. And I eventually got to Mid-Valley. And then I think the riverside park atmosphere disappeared. And there still seemed to be like a bike trail, but it was more like a major system following alongside the highway. So I don't know how long it would have continued, but it was no longer a park-like setting beside the river. And I didn't want to ride my bike to Klang or anything like that. So at Mid-Valley, I turned around and came back again. And I saw on my way down that there were sections of the River of Life project and trail on the other side of the river. So I decided to see whether I could go to the other side of the river and go back along that side. Come down on one side of the river, return on the other. And that turned into a major adventure, because on that side of the river there were tons of blocks, block areas as well. A couple of times, the very beginning, I went across a bridge to go down that side, and I just ran into a dead end. Like, I just didn't continue. So I had to turn around, go all the way back across the bridge to this side, continue up, go to the next bridge, cross over, follow alongside the river. And there I just ran into all kinds of construction. So you're riding alongside the river on the bike path, on the pedestrian walkway, and then there would be giant construction barriers. And they created these weird tunnels for you, right? But there's a really busy highway there. So now you have to get off your bike and then roll your bike along some grass to go into this narrow construction tunnel right beside the highway. And then you're walking your bike, through this tunnel area. And then eventually I got to a place where the Riverside Trail ended completely. It basically just dead ended. You could not go any further in that direction. And then you had a choice. You could either take the highway, which was to my right, and you're not supposed to take that highway on a bike, or you can pick up your bike and climb up several stairways, to get up to this bridge, and then roll your bike to the other side, and then carry your bike down the stairs on the other side, and then continue on from there. So yeah, you watch the time warp video that I shot. It's like 6 minutes long. It documents that entire ride, and then just mentally think about every single barrier that I run into on that whole trip. And it's a lot of fun. I mean, it's a real adventurous ride, and it's very, very interesting, but it is not a gentle riverside ride. It's an adventure. It's an obstacle course on a bicycle is what it is. And I guess the second time you do it, it gets easier. You know where to go, and you know where all the barriers are, and you're kind of prepared for them. But the first time you do it, it's quite something to do. But I haven't edited the 360 video from that ride yet. That's what I'm going to do today, I guess. One last technical story to end my thoughts for this morning. When I met this friend of mine for McDonald's the other day, she is a cyclist, and she rode her bike to McDonald's, and I noticed she had a type of bike that I don't think I'd seen before. There's a name for these I've discovered since then, but I've forgotten the name of it. But normally with a bike, you have a gear system where you have rings on the front, and like where the pedals are, we call them the chain rings, and then you have a cassette on the back with a whole bunch of other, cogs on the back. And then the combination of the front ring and the rear ring creates the speed that you're traveling at. So you change the gears, and on the front you might have 3 chain rings, small, medium, and large. You put it on put the chain on the large ring to go faster, put it on the small ring to go slower, and on the rear it's the opposite, I suppose. But you put it on the small one to go faster and the big one to go slower. And the combination of those dictates how much power you need to apply to the pedals, either to go faster or to climb uphill. So if you're going to a hill, of course, you want to drop down into a low gear, into first gear, so that when you're pedaling really fast, but then the bike is moving really slow, and then you have a lot of power. You've got a mechanical advantage because of the gearing system. It gives you a lot of power for going uphill, and then when you're going downhill or on a flat, you change the system, so now you're pedaling more slowly, but the bike is going really, really fast. But her bike only had 1 chain ring, like 1 ring on the pedals on the front, and then a cassette on the back. But the difference was that on the back, her biggest cog was huge. It was like this immense thing. And I was thinking, wow, I want one of those, because the bigger the cog on the back, the more teeth it has, the more power you can develop for going uphill. And when you're on a touring bike, a very heavy bike with a lot of luggage on it, you want as much power as you can get for going uphill. I don't care about speed. I don't even need the big chain ring on the front because I never use it. I never ride that fast. I'm not a speedster. I need the lower gears and as low gear as possible. So I was looking at her bike and thinking, man, I want to get one of those. Just, can I get that? Can I have that huge thing? And then I can get more power on my bike. But since then, I've done some research into it. I counted the teeth on hers, and her rear cog had 51 teeth. So 51 teeth, that was the size of it. I compared it to my bike. My biggest ring, which is actually, the biggest cog, it was the biggest one I could find. I went searching, shopping for the biggest one I could put on my bike physically, and the biggest one I could mount was 40 teeth. So mine is 40, hers was 51, significantly larger. And I thought, wow, that must give her a lot of power going uphill. Turns out, though, that's not true, because the chain ring on the front, she only has 1 of them, and it has 36 teeth. I have 3 on my mountain bike, and my smallest one has 22 teeth. So 22 versus 36. So in fact, when you combine my 22 on the front and 40 on the rear, it actually gives me a much greater mechanical advantage than her 36 on the front and 51 on the back. So the one on the back for her, the 51, is huge, but the advantage of that was canceled out because her ring on the front had 36 teeth, quite a bit bigger than the one I have. So I'm not an expert in this, but I did some calculations, and I think if you look at just the gear ratio, looking at her system, she has a gear ratio of 0.7. That's her gear ratio when you combine those for her lowest gear. Mine is 0.55. So 0.55 to 0.7 and for my gear ratio, and which is it's an advantage what I have. I actually end up with a lot more power with my gearing compared to what she has, even though she has that huge cog on the back. So to take advantage of that huge cog, she would have to have a small chain ring on the front, but she doesn't. She only has the 1 chain ring, which with 36 teeth. I don't know if that makes any sense to anyone out there, but I thought that was quite interesting because I've always been looking for bigger cogs on the back, smaller chain rings on the front, just to maximize the mechanical advantage. And the best I've been able to do is what I have now, like 41 on the back and 22, is that what I said? 22 on the front. Yeah, oh, 40 on the back, 22 on the front. And that gives me a lot of power for going uphill. I mean, I can be spinning my pedals as fast as I can, you know, like really zooming along, and the bike will be moving at 5 kilometers an hour, you know, so it's like, and then the stately progress up the hill, because it gives me a lot of torque, you know, a lot of mechanical advantage, the combination of those two rings. Anyway, I thought that was interesting. Because even the mechanical advantage I have with my bike, I still want more. You know, I have a lot of power with my bike for going uphill, but I feel like I wouldn't mind having one more gear, even lower than the one that I have, because I want more power. But then the problem with that is you eventually reach a point where you can apply so much power with your pedals that the metal of the bike can't handle it anymore. So you apply so much power that you actually snap the chain right in half. So you kind of have to balance that. I mean, there is a limit to the amount of power that you can apply to the bike system, because you'll start breaking the components because the metal just can't handle that kind of force. So yeah, if you're riding a touring bike, like fully loaded with all your camping gear and food and water and clothing and camera equipment, all that kind of stuff, it's a heavy bike. And then with your body as well, and then you come to a steep hill, and then you're really putting a lot of pressure on the pedals in order to go up that hill. Eventually you reach the point where you're going to drive forward with your leg, and then you're just going to snap the chain right in half, you know. So yeah, there is such a thing as too much power, and I think my bike is like right on the edges. And even if you don't break the chain, the more force you apply, it actually stretches the chain, which is a real problem. You know, it's a metal chain. You think it wouldn't stretch, but it's made up of so many links, right? Individual chain links. And there's so many of them, and you apply a lot of pressure. If there's the tiniest amount of stretch in each one, it adds up to your chain becoming loose, and then it no longer fits over the teeth on the cogs and the chain rings, and then the chain starts to grind against the teeth and it wears them down, and then you wear out your entire drivetrain. So there's like a real delicate balancing you have to do with your drivetrain, you know, the amount of pressure you apply, stretching the chain, grinding the teeth, how often you have to replace the chain because of it, and yeah, a lot goes into it, a lot more than you'd realize. So with that, those are my stories from yesterday, riding along the river of life. And I didn't really even go that far. You know, I felt like I went on a major journey, but all I did was ride to Mid-Valley and back. And I think I covered, 13 kilometers in total for that entire ride. And yet I felt like I went around the world. I mean, it was quite a challenging ride, but quite an interesting one. I may do another ride doing the river of life to the north. That was south to Mid-Valley and back, but there's the other half of the river of life goes to the north. I don't know where it begins, but I might, ride in that direction, turn around and come back again, do that on a different day. So with that, I'm going to shut this down and get on with the rest of my day. And as always, I'll see you in the next video.